what happens when a seemingly insignificant piece of land becomes a battleground for two nations. This isn't just any piece of land, it's a literal gold mine, one that has fueled disputes, shaped economies, and tested international law. This is the story of the Bakassi Peninsula, a small but resource-rich territory at the heart of one of Africa's most complex territorial disputes. And the battle is not really over.
Queen of Bakassi Peninsula.
Bakassi Peninsula.
Bakassi Peninsula.
King, who owns Bakassi Peninsula?
This is the Bakassi Peninsula, a tiny landmass nestled in the Gulf of Guinea, southeast of Nigeria. It might seem insignificant at first glance as it's barely as large as Abeokuta, yet it holds extraordinary value. Beneath its waters lies vast reserves of crude oil and natural gas resources that fuel about 35% of the Cameroonian economy, producing about 15,000 barrels of crude oil daily. For both Nigeria and Cameroon, this land is more than just territory. It's an economic lifeline, a flashpoint of political, historical, and cultural tensions. To better understand the Bakassi conflict, we must go back in time to the colonial era, where it all began.
The threat of sedition is gone.
Nigeria is free.
Back in 1884, Britain and Germany, the colonial overlords of Nigeria and Cameroon, signed the Anglo-German Treaty. This agreement transferred Bakassi from British control to Germany. The deal was simple on paper: divide spheres of influence, maintain peace, and avoid stepping on each other's toes. But history just doesn't stop with treaties. Following Germany's defeat in World War I, the League of Nations, essentially the forerunner to United Nations, reallocated Germany's treaties. Southern Cameroon was placed under British mandate and later merged with northern Nigeria. As Nigeria gained independence in 1960, the country's borders remained uncertain, setting the stage for future disputes over the Bakassi Peninsula. But for many years, this quiet, swampy, sparsely populated territory seemed to matter very little to anyone. Although Nigeria maintained a naval presence there, the Cameroonians at the time simply couldn't care less, as the seemingly worthless peninsula was home to a population that were 90% Nigerian fishers, and life continued to go on peacefully. However, this peace wouldn't last long. As the 1970s rolled by came the oil boom and the subsequent discovery of colossal reserves of oil on the peninsula. Bakassi, once dismissed as a remote mosquito-ridden backwater, became immensely valuable. Cameroon began to assert its claims to the land, citing the Anglo-German Treaty of 1913 as proof that Bakassi was rightfully theirs. Nigeria, under the leadership of General Yakubu Gowon, then entered negotiations with Cameroon. These talks led to the Yaoundé Declaration of 1970 and later the Maroua Accords of 1975, which similarly handed Bakassi over to Cameroon. But the story just doesn't end there. Just weeks after the Maroua Accords were signed, Nigeria experienced a military coup. The new government led by Murtala Mohammed quickly declared the accords null and void, arguing that they hadn't been ratified by the Nigerian Senate. Many reports claimed that Gowon was encouraged, or rather forced, by the British to hand over Bakassi to Cameroon, while others suggested that he did such out of his friendship with the then president of Cameroon, who grew up together in northern Nigeria. Whatever the truth, one thing remained clear: Bakassi's status is far from resolved. In the decades that followed, Bakassi became a hotspot for military provocations. Cameroon insisted the treaties were valid, while Nigeria refused to back down. Certain Nigerian generals saw this as an opportunity to flex Nigeria's military muscle and project power in the region. However, the possibility of seizing Bakassi by force would ultimately be discarded for the better, following the deployment of French troops to Cameroon. This would mark the beginning of the West African Cold War. The years that followed would see increased military spendings from both sides and rapid troops deployments to the border, in expectation of an armed military conflict, which both sides were willing to blame one another for starting. Various clashes occurred, of which the most severe resulted in nearly 100 deaths, bringing the two brothers to the brink of war. As tensions continued to escalate, it became very clear that a more permanent solution was needed. In an attempt to resolve the dispute once and for all, Cameroon filed a case at the International Court of Justice in 1994 to decide the legal status of Bakassi. The case dragged on for 8 long years, during which tensions lingered. Finally, in 2002, the ICJ ruled that Bakassi is indeed a part of Cameroon. The court based this decision on the Anglo-German Treaty of 1913, which it deemed a legally binding agreement. For many Nigerians, this felt like a betrayal of their country's sovereignty, as the treaty had been signed by colonialists decades before either countries gained independence.
It is not in conformity with the resolution of the House. How do I feel personally? I feel disappointed. I feel that we have done ourselves a disservice, and I feel that it flouts the resolution of the House of Representatives.
Conversely, many Cameroonians viewed the ruling as a vindication of their just territorial claims.
Yeah, while listening to the president's reaction, I was very happy because he did not sound as if it was a victory for Cameroon and a failure for Nigeria. Well, he made us to know that it was something like it was like a negotiation between two nations which have been living for long as brothers, and again that they are just respecting the rulings of the Court of Justice, International Court of Justice.
Despite public outrage, Nigeria eventually complied with the ICJ's decision in 2002. Nigeria's then President Olusegun Obasanjo signed the Greentree Agreement, formally transferring Bakassi to Cameroon. Nigerian troops were withdrawn within 60 days, and by the end of the year, Cameroon had full administrative control. But this transfer came at a cost. The Bakassi Peninsula was home to a population that was 90% Nigerian, and for them, the ICJ ruling was a nightmare. They were faced with an impossible choice: either remain in Bakassi and live as foreigners under Cameroonian rule, or approach their lives and livelihoods and relocate to Nigeria. For many, living meant abandoning their homes, livelihoods, businesses, and families. Some resisted, calling for self-determination or even secession. Others resented the Nigerian government for what they saw as a betrayal. To this day, the region remains a hotbed of tensions, with poverty, sporadic violence, and lingering resentment over the ICJ's decision. The Bakassi Peninsula isn't just a story of oil and borders. It's a story of colonial legacies, international politics, and the human cost of geopolitical decisions. This is one of these stories that leave us with more questions than answers. Should modern borders be determined by colonial-era treaties? And what happens when the lives of ordinary people are caught in the crossfire of international politics? What do you think? Was Nigeria unfairly treated by the ICJ, or was Nigeria vindicated by the rule of law? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into